The boy's scream cut through the frozen air like a knife. "Mama!" Clara. Jane Whitmore spun around on the icy platform, her heart slamming against her ribs. A child was running toward her, tears streaming down his face, arms stretched wide open. She'd never seen him before in her life. But he crashed into her skirts and held on like she was the only thing keeping him alive. "You came back," he sobbed. "You finally came back." And Clara, standing alone in a town where no one wanted her, didn't know whether to push him away or hold on forever. Stay until the end and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. And if you haven't already subscribed to join our family of story lovers. 3 days. 3 days on a rattling train with nothing but a battered suitcase and $14 sewn into her corset. 3 days of stale bread and cold coffee and the same question circling her mind like a vulture. What if he doesn't come? Clara pressed her forehead against the frost-covered window and watched Montana territory blur past. Snow everywhere. White fields stretching to the horizon. White mountains cutting into a gray sky. White, 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 like God had erased everything and started over. Maybe that's what she needed. A blank page. A fresh start. Maybe that's what she was fooling herself into believing. The train lurched, and she grabbed the seat in front of her. An old woman across the aisle looked up from her knitting eyes, sharp and judging. "Mail-order bride." Clara's spine stiffened. "Excuse me." "I can always tell." The woman's needles clicked steadily. "The nervous ones traveling alone with nothing but hope and a worn-out dress. Let me guess. Some rancher out here promised you a home and a ring." "I don't see how that's your concern." "It ain't." Click, click, click. "Just making conversation. Though I'd be careful if I were you. Men who can't find wives the normal way usually got reasons." Clara turned back to the window. Her hands were shaking, and she pressed them flat against her thighs to still them. She already knew the risks. She'd read Franklin Pierce Weston's advertisement 17 times before she'd found the courage to respond. Widower 44. Seeks respectable woman for marriage and companionship. Must be of good character and willing to work. Ranch life. Montana territory. Only serious inquiries. Serious. She'd been serious. Desperate, really, but she'd dressed it up in careful penmanship and proper grammar. She'd told him about her education, her experience as a governess, her willingness to work hard. She'd left out the parts about being dismissed without references, about spending her last winter in a boarding house, where rats ran through the walls, about the nights she'd gone to bed hungry, because food cost money she didn't have. She'd left out a lot of things. Silver Creek Station, 5 minutes. Clara's stomach dropped. This was it. She stood on trembling legs and reached for her suitcase. The leather was cracked, one handle held together with string. Everything she owned fit inside it. 2 dresses, 1 nightgown. Her mother's poetry book. A silver comb her grandmother had given her before the fever took her. Not much to show for 29 years of living. The train shuddered to a stop, and Clara made her way to the door. Cold air hit her like a fist when she stepped onto the platform. She gasped, pulling her thin coat tighter, breath coming out in white clouds. The station was small. A wooden platform, a ticket office with a crooked sign, a few wagons waiting nearby. Beyond it, she could see the main street of Silver Creek buildings huddled together against the cold smoke rising from chimneys. And people. A handful of them stamping their feet against the cold, waiting for passengers or packages. Clara scanned every face, searching for the man in Franklin Weston's photograph. Dark hair, strong jaw, pleasant smile. He'd looked kind in that picture. She'd stared at it for hours, trying to read his character in the set of his mouth, the lines around his eyes. He'd looked like a man who kept his promises. But she didn't see him anywhere. Her heart began to pound harder. Maybe he was late. Maybe he got held up. Maybe, you, Clara Whitmore. She turned. A young man in a conductor's uniform was looking at her with something like pity in his eyes. Yes I am. I'm supposed to be meeting someone. Franklin Weston. Do you know him? The conductor's expression flickered. I know of him. Is he here? Is he coming? Can't say, ma'am. He shifted his weight, not meeting her eyes. You might want to wait inside. Station office has a stove. But he knew I was arriving today. I sent a telegram. I'm sure he did. The conductor tipped his hat and moved away, and Clara stood frozen in the swirling snow watching him go. Something was wrong. She could feel a cold knot forming in her chest that had nothing to do with the weather. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The platform emptied as passengers collected their bags and left with family members, friends, drivers. The train huffed and pulled away, leaving Clara standing alone in the settling white. No one came for her. An hour. Her toes were numb. Her fingers ached. Snow had gathered on her shoulders and her hair, and she'd stopped brushing it away. What was the point? Miss? She turned. A woman had emerged from the ticket office wrapped in a thick wool coat. She was perhaps 60, with steel gray hair pulled back severely and eyes that missed nothing. You've been standing out here a long while. You waiting for someone? Franklin Weston. Clara hated how small her voice sounded. He was supposed to meet me. Something crossed the woman's face. Surprise, then understanding, then something that looked almost like anger. Franklin Weston sent for you. Yes, we're to be married. I have his letters, his photograph. Come inside. The woman's voice had changed, gone hard and urgent. Right now. You'll freeze to death standing out here and we need to talk. Clara followed her into the station office where a pot-bellied stove threw off blessed heat. She stood as close to it as she dared, hands extended, shivering violently now that she was out of the wind. The woman, Mrs. Patterson, she said her name was, poured coffee from a dented pot and pressed the cup into Clara's frozen fingers. Drink that, all of it. Clara obeyed. The coffee was bitter and barely warm, but it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. Now. Mrs. Patterson sat down behind her desk, folding her hands. Tell me exactly what Franklin Weston promised you. He said he had a ranch east of here, said he needed a wife to help manage his household, said he'd provide for me, give me a home, a respectable life. Clara's voice cracked. He said he'd be waiting when I arrived. Did you send him money for the wedding, for household goods? Anything like that? No, I didn't have money to send. Did he pay for your passage? No, I borrowed the fare from... She stopped. From the woman who ran her boarding house at ruinous interest. A debt she was supposed to repay from her new husband's generosity. Mrs. Patterson let out a long breath. Then you got off lucky. Lucky? I don't understand. Franklin Weston is a fraud. The words hit Clara like a blow. He's been running this scheme for years. Advertises for brides, gets them to send money ahead for various reasons, then disappears before they arrive. Sometimes he shows up long enough to take whatever else they've got. Sometimes he doesn't bother. The room tilted. Clara gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself. No, that can't be right. His letters were lies, every word. But he seemed so sincere. He wrote about his ranch, his hopes for the future. He doesn't have a ranch. He's got a room above the saloon and a talent for telling women what they want to hear. Mrs. Patterson's voice softened slightly. I'm sorry, girl. You're not the first one he's fooled, and you probably won't be the last. Clara stared at her. The words were there, she could hear them, but they wouldn't arrange themselves into meaning. Franklin Weston was a fraud. There was no ranch. There was no marriage. There was no home waiting for her. There was nothing. What? She had to stop and try again. What do I do now? You got any money? $14. Mrs. Patterson winced. That won't get you back east. Might get you a week at the boarding house if you stretch it. And then what? Silence. I don't know, Mrs. Patterson admitted. But you can't stay on this platform. I've got to close up in an hour. Clara nodded numbly. She should feel something, anger, fear, despair, but there was only emptiness. a vast white nothing like the snow outside. She stood. "Thank you for the coffee, and for telling me the truth. Where will you go?" "I don't know yet." She picked up her suitcase and walked back out onto the platform. The snow had stopped, but the cold was brutal, seeping through her coat, her dress, her skin all the way to her bones. $14. No references. No connections. No one expecting her anywhere. This is how people die, she thought distantly. This is how women end up frozen in ditches, found when the spring thaw comes. She began walking toward town, not because she had a plan, but because standing still meant giving up, and she wasn't ready for that yet. The main street of Silver Creek was quiet, most folks sensible enough to stay indoors. Clara passed the general store, the blacksmith, the saloon with its swinging doors, and the sound of rough laughter inside. She kept her head down, her shoulders hunched, trying to look like she had somewhere to be. She didn't see the commotion at first, but she heard it raised voices, the sound of a child crying, and something made her look up. A group had gathered near the far end of the street. 3 men, well-dressed, surrounding a tall man in worn work clothes who was holding a small boy against his chest. The boy was sobbing, clutching his father's coat face buried against his shoulder. "I'm telling you one last time, Brennan." The speaker was a heavy-set man, with a silver watch chain across his vest. "Pay what you owe or get off that land." "I don't owe you anything." The tall man's voice was low-controlled, but Clara could hear the fury underneath. "That loan was paid in full 2 years ago. You know it as well as I do." "That's not what my records show." "Then your records are a lie." The heavy-set man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Careful. You're already on thin ice around here. People talk about a man who can't keep his wife alive, can't keep his ranch running, can't even keep his boy from turning into a wild animal." The child's crying intensified. Clara saw the father's arms tighten protectively around him. "Don't you talk about my son." "I'll talk about whatever I damn well please. This is my town, Brennan. My bank. My rules." The man stepped closer. "You've got until the end of the month. Then I'm taking that land, and you and your boy can find somewhere else to freeze to death." He turned and walked away, his companions following. The crowd began to disperse, people hurrying off with their eyes averted, and Clara realized with a sick feeling that no one had stood with the father and son. No one had spoken up. No one had even looked them in the eye. She should keep walking. She had her own problems, her own crisis to deal with. What happened to these strangers was none of her business. But the boy was still crying, and the sound cut through her like glass. She found herself moving closer. The man Brennan they'd called him was kneeling in the snow, now trying to calm his son. He was big, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days of beard on his jaw. His clothes were worn but clean, his boots caked with mud and snow. Sam, look at me." His voice was gentle now, patient. "It's all right. He's gone. He said bad things about Mama." The boy's voice was muffled, broken with sobs. "He said you couldn't keep her alive. What did he mean, Papa? What did he mean?" The man closed his eyes, and Clara saw pain flash across his face, raw and unguarded. "He didn't mean anything, son. Some people just say cruel things because it makes them feel big. You can't pay them any mind. But Mama, your mama loved you more than anything in this world. Nothing anyone says can change that. You hear me?" The boy nodded, but he was still crying, still clinging to his father, like he was afraid to let go. Clara should walk away. She should. The boy turned his head. Their eyes met, and the world stopped. He was perhaps 7 years old, with dark hair like his father, and eyes that were gray-blue, like storm clouds. There were tear tracks on his thin cheeks, and his nose was running, and he looked so lost, so utterly devastated that Clara's heart cracked right down the middle. Then his expression changed. His eyes went wide, his mouth fell open, and something passed across his face that Clara didn't understand: recognition, confusion, desperate hope, all tangled together. "Mama!" The word was barely a whisper. Clara froze. No, I'm not. But the boy was already scrambling out of his father's arms, already stumbling toward her through the snow, already crying out with a voice that rang across the empty street. "Mama!" He crashed into her before she could react. Small arms wrapped around her waist. A thin body pressed against hers. And she felt him shaking, felt the sobs tearing through him, felt the desperate strength of his grip. "You came back. You finally came back. Papa said you were in heaven, but I knew you'd come back. I prayed every night and you came back." "Sam!" The father's voice was sharp with shock. He was on his feet, moving toward them, his face a mask of horror. "Sam, no. Let go of her. She's not." But the boy wouldn't let go. He held on like his life depended on it. Face pressed into Clara's coat, body trembling. "It's her, Papa. Look at her. She has Mama's eyes. She has Mama's hair. It's her. It's really her." Clara looked up at the father Jacob she would learn later, Jacob Thomas Brennan, and saw her own shock reflected back at her. He was staring at her face, studying her features, and she saw it happen the moment he recognized whatever his son had seen. "My God," he breathed. "You look just like her." "I'm sorry." Clara's voice came out strange thin. "I don't know what's happening. I don't know who—" "My wife." Jacob's voice cracked. "My wife, Mary. She died 11 months ago. And you—" He stopped, shook his head. "I've never seen anything like it. You could be her twin." Sam pulled back just far enough to look up at Clara's face, and the hope in his eyes was almost unbearable. "You're her," he whispered. "I know you're her. Papa just doesn't understand yet, but I know." "Sweetheart." Clara knelt down, bringing herself to his level. "I'm not your mama. My name is Clara Whitmore. I just arrived on the train from Boston. I've never been to Montana before today." "No." Sam shook his head violently. "No, you're wrong. You're just confused because you were in heaven so long. But you're back now. You came back to us." Clara looked up at Jacob helplessly. "I don't know what to do. I don't want to hurt him, but I know." Jacob ran a hand through his hair, looking lost. "Sam, son, we need to let this lady go. She's got her own business to attend to." "No. Sam. No." The boy's voice rose to a shriek. "You can't make her leave. She just got here. If she goes away again, she might never come back." People were stopping to stare. Clara could feel their eyes, hear their whispers. She was a stranger in this town, a woman with no reputation and no protector, and she was causing a scene with a widower and his child in the middle of Main Street. This was a disaster. But when she looked down at Sam's face, at the tears still streaming down his cheeks, at the desperate terror in his eyes, she couldn't bring herself to pull away. "Listen to me." She kept her voice soft, the way she used to speak to frightened children when she was a governess. "I'm not going to disappear. I'm going to stand right here while you talk to your papa. And then maybe, if it's all right with him, we can all go somewhere warm and figure this out together. Does that sound fair?" Sam studied her face suspiciously. "You promise you won't leave?" "I promise." He hesitated, then slowly released his grip on her waist. But he kept hold of her hand, his small fingers ice cold and trembling. Jacob watched the exchange with an expression Clara couldn't read. Then he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I don't know who you are or why you're here, but my son hasn't spoken this many words since his mother died. Hasn't cried like this. Hasn't—" He stopped, his jaw working. "You do something to calm him down, get him to act like a normal child for the first time in almost a year, and I don't know whether to thank you or run the other direction." "I don't understand it either," Clara admitted. "I was just walking past. I didn't do anything." "You look like her. That's enough." Jacob glanced down at his son. "He's been waiting for her to come back, praying for it. I've tried to explain that the dead don't come back, but he won't hear it. and now you show up looking like Mary's ghost and—" He broke off, shaking his head. "I'm sorry," Clara said again, because she didn't know what else to say. "Where are you headed? You said you came in on the train." The question brought reality crashing back. The failed arrangement, the missing groom, the $14 that wouldn't last the week. "I don't know." The words came out before she could stop them. "I was supposed to be meeting someone, but he didn't come. I don't have anywhere to go." Jacob's eyes sharpened. Meeting who? Franklin Weston. She watched understanding dawn on his face, followed by anger, followed by something that looked almost like sympathy. "That son of a—" He glanced at Sam and moderated his language. "That man's a crook. You're not the first woman he's done this to." "So I've been told? You got any money? Any family you can wire?" "No, nothing." Silence fell between them. Sam was still gripping Clara's hand, still watching her face with that unnerving intensity, and Clara felt the weight of two sets of eyes measuring her, judging her, deciding what she was worth. "I've got a ranch 12 miles east," Jacob said slowly. "Just me and Sam since Mary passed. Place is falling apart because I can't keep up with everything. House hasn't been properly cleaned in months. We've been eating food that would make a dog sick." Clara's heart began to pound. Was he offering what she thought he was offering? "I can't pay much. Room and board maybe a few dollars a month when the cattle sell. But if you're looking for work and a roof over your head—" He trailed off, then added roughly, "I'm not suggesting anything improper. You'd have your own room. This would be strictly business." "Papa." Sam's face transformed. "Papa, she's going to live with us." "That's up to her." Jacob's eyes met Clara's. "What do you say, Miss Whitmore? You willing to take a chance on a grieving man and his troubled boy?" Clara thought about her alternatives. The boarding house she couldn't afford. The streets that would kill her come nightfall. The train she couldn't pay to board. She thought about Sam's hand in hers, small and cold, and holding on so tight. She thought about what it meant to have nowhere left to run. "Yes," she said. "I'm willing." Sam let out a whoop of joy that echoed off the buildings. He threw himself at Clara again, hugging her fiercely, and over his head she met Jacob's eyes. There was no warmth there, no welcome. Just a desperate man making a desperate bargain because he didn't know what else to do. That made two of them. "Get your things," Jacob said. "Wagons at the end of the street. We need to be back before dark, or we'll freeze on the road." Clara picked up her suitcase, she'd dropped it somewhere in the chaos, and followed him through the snow, Sam still clinging to her hand. She didn't look back at Silver Creek. There was nothing to look back for. The wagon ride was long and cold, and mostly silent. Jacob sat rigid on the seat, handling the horses with practiced ease, his jaw set and his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Sam sat between them, pressed close to Clara, occasionally reaching up to touch her sleeve or her arm, as if reassuring himself she was still there. The landscape was brutal in its emptiness. White fields, dark trees, mountains rising like walls against the gray sky. Clara had never seen anything like it. In Boston, there was always something buildings, people, noise, movement. Here, there was just space, endless and terrifying, and she understood suddenly why people went mad in places like this. "It's not much further." Jacob's voice made her jump. She realized she'd been shivering violently, teeth chattering despite her best efforts to control them. "I'm fine." "You're half frozen." He didn't look at her, but he reached behind the seat and pulled out a wool blanket, handing it to her without comment. "Wrap up. Won't do anyone any good if you catch your death before we get home." Home. The word sounded strange, applied to a place she'd never seen, a house she'd never entered. But she wrapped the blanket around herself and Sam both, and tried to ignore the way her fingers were turning blue. "What happened with that man in town?" she asked. "The one who was threatening you." Jacob's expression darkened. "Aldous Crane. Owns the bank, half the businesses, most of the town council. He's been trying to take my land for 3 years. Why? Because it borders his property and he wants it. Because I wouldn't sell when he offered, and he doesn't like being told no. Because... He stopped, his hands tightening on the reins. Because Mary stood up to him once, and he's never forgiven us for it. Clara waited, but he didn't elaborate. The loan he mentioned, she pressed. You said it was paid. It was. I have the papers to prove it. But his word carries more weight than mine in Silver Creek, and he knows it. Jacob's voice was bitter. That's how it works out here. Men like Crane make the rules, and the rest of us just try to survive them. Can't the sheriff do anything? Jacob laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. Sheriff works for Crane. Everyone works for Crane one way or another. Those who don't leave or get pushed out. He glanced at her sideways. You should know what you're walking into. My name's not exactly respected around here. People think I'm bad luck. Think Mary's death was some kind of judgment. Judgment for what? For not being good enough, for being poor, for not bowing and scraping to the right people. His jaw flexed. For marrying above my station, according to some. Mary came from a good family back east. They cut her off when she chose me. People said she threw her life away. Clara thought about her own family. The parents dead from fever. The relatives who'd refused to take her in because her father had been too Irish and her mother too Methodist, and there was always some reason to abandon the people who needed you most. Did she think that she threw her life away? Jacob was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had changed. Softer. Rougher. She said the day she married me was the happiest day of her life. Said she'd never regretted it, not even when things got hard. Said she'd rather have 1 year with me than 50 with anyone else. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. He cleared his throat. Sam, you still awake under there? A small voice emerged from beneath the blanket. Yeah, Papa. We're almost home. You want to show Miss Whitmore the place when we get there? Give her the grand tour. Sam's head popped out, eyes bright. Can I show her Mama's garden? And the chickens, and Pepper? You can show her whatever you want. Just let her get warm first. Clara felt Sam's hand find hers again beneath the blanket, squeezing tight. You're going to love it, he whispered. It's the best place in the whole world. She didn't know what to say to that. The best place in the whole world, according to a 7-year-old boy who'd lost his mother and thought a stranger might be her ghost. The ranch appeared on the horizon as the last light was fading from the sky. A house, a barn, several smaller buildings, all of them huddled together against the wind. Smoke rose from the chimney and lamplight glowed in the windows. Someone had left lights burning, and despite everything, Clara felt something loosen in her chest at the sight. It looked like shelter, like safety, like a place where she might survive the night. Jacob pulled the wagon up in front of the house and set the brake. Sam, run inside and stoke up the fire. Miss Whitmore and I will be right behind you. Sam scrambled down and raced for the door. Pepper, a scraggly brown dog who'd emerged barking from the barn at his heels. For a moment, Clara and Jacob sat alone in the wagon, the horses stamping and snorting in the cold. I should tell you something, Jacob said, not looking at her. About why I offered you this job. Clara waited. It wasn't just because Sam latched onto you. It wasn't just because you needed help and I needed help and it seemed like a fair trade. He turned to face her, and in the dim light his eyes were dark and unreadable. It's because for the first time since Mary died, my son looked at someone with hope instead of fear. For the first time in almost a year, he acted like a normal child instead of a ghost himself. His voice roughened. I don't know who you are, Miss Whitmore. I don't know what you're running from or what you want from life. But if you can give my boy back even a piece of what he lost, I'll pay any price you ask. I'll give you anything I have. Clara's throat tightened. I'm not trying to replace his mother. I wouldn't know how. I'm not asking you to replace her. I'm asking you to help him remember what it felt like to be happy. Jacob climbed down from the wagon and extended his hand to help her down. "Think you can do that?" Clara looked at the house, at the light spilling from the windows, at the small silhouette of a boy pressed against the glass, watching them. "I can try," she said, and she took his hand. The first night was the longest of Clara's life. She lay in the small room at the top of the stairs, wrapped in quilts that smelled like cedar and lavender, listening to the house settle around her. Every creak made her jump. Every whistle of wind through the cracks sounded like a voice calling her name. She kept thinking about Sam's face when she'd tucked him into bed. The way he'd grabbed her wrist and held on. "You'll be here in the morning." "I'll be here. Promise. I promise." He'd fallen asleep still holding her hand, and she'd had to peel his fingers away one by one, slow and careful like diffusing a bomb. The whole time she could feel Jacob watching from the doorway. Not suspicious exactly, more like bewildered. Like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. She couldn't believe it either. 12 hours ago, she'd stepped off a train expecting to meet her future husband. Now she was lying in a dead woman's house being mistaken for a dead woman's ghost, agreeing to care for a dead woman's child. What was she doing? The questions circled her mind until exhaustion finally pulled her under. When she woke, gray light was filtering through the curtains, and she could smell coffee. Real coffee, not the weak substitute she'd been drinking for months. Her stomach growled so loudly, it embarrassed her. She dressed quickly in her other dress, the blue cotton slightly less worn than the gray, and made her way downstairs. Jacob was at the stove, wrestling with a pan of something that might have been eggs. It was hard to tell. They'd turned into a solid brown mass that smoked ominously. "I can do that." He turned startled. Clearly he hadn't heard her come down. "I was trying to—" He looked at the pan, then back at her. "I'm not much of a cook." "I noticed." Clara crossed to the stove and took the pan from his hands. "Sit down. I'll make breakfast." "You don't have to." "Mr. Brennan." She met his eyes squarely. "You hired me to take care of your household. Let me take care of it." Something flickered in his expression. Not offense. Something closer to relief. "Jacob," he said. "Excuse me." "Call me Jacob. Mr. Brennan was my father, and he was a mean drunk who beat his wife. I'd rather not be reminded of him every time you need my attention." Clara nodded slowly. "Jacob, then. And you can call me Clara." "Clara." He said it like he was testing the weight of it. "All right." She turned back to the stove and began scraping out the ruined eggs. The kitchen was a disaster. Dishes piled in the sink, flour spilled across the counter. Something sticky on the floor that she didn't want to identify, but the bones of it were good. Solid. Well made. This had been a happy home once. She could feel it in the walls, in the careful way someone had hung curtains over the windows, and the flowers painted on the cabinet doors. Mary's touch. Everywhere she looked, Mary's touch. "Where's Sam?" she asked. "Still sleeping. First time in months he's made it through the night without screaming." Jacob's voice was rough. "Whatever you did last night, it worked. I didn't do anything. I just sat with him." "Yeah, well, nobody's done that in a while." He paused. "Including me." Clara heard the guilt in those words, heavy and sharp. She didn't comment on it. Wasn't her place. She found eggs in a basket by the door, bacon in the cold cellar, bread that was stale but still edible. She worked quickly, efficiently, the familiar motions of cooking settling her nerves. Within 20 minutes, she'd produced a meal that actually looked like food. Jacob stared at the plate she set in front of him like she'd performed a miracle. "This is—" He stopped. Swallowed. "Mary used to make breakfast like this. Before." Clara didn't know what to say. Before seemed to hang in the air between them, heavy with everything it contained. She was saved from responding by the thunder of small feet on the stairs. "Clara!" Sam burst into the kitchen like a small tornado, still in his nightshirt, hair sticking up in all directions. He skidded to a stop when he saw her at the stove, and his whole face transformed. "You're still here." "I told you I would be." "I know, but—" His voice dropped to a whisper. Sometimes people say things, and then they don't do them. Clara's heart clenched. She knelt down, bringing herself to his level. "Sam, look at me." She waited until his gray-blue eyes met hers. "I don't make promises I can't keep. If I tell you something, I mean it. Understand?" He nodded slowly. Then, without warning, he threw his arms around her neck and hugged her so hard she nearly lost her balance. "You smell like Mama," he mumbled against her shoulder. "You smell just like her." Clara looked up and found Jacob watching them. His expression was impossible to read. The first week passed in a blur of work. Clara threw herself into the household with a ferocity that surprised even her. She scrubbed floors until her knees ached. She washed curtains and beat rugs and reorganized pantries. She cooked meals that actually tasted like someone had cared about making them. And slowly, impossibly, the house began to feel less like a mausoleum. Sam followed her everywhere. He helped her knead bread, chattering about his mother's recipe. He showed her the chickens, introducing each one by name. He brought her rocks from the creek and feathers he'd found in the barn, presenting each one like a treasure. "This one's pretty. You can have it." "Thank you, Sam. I'll keep it forever." "Promise. Promise." Jacob kept his distance. He left before dawn each day to work the ranch, coming home exhausted, as the sun set, eating whatever Clara put in front of him, with mechanical gratitude. They barely spoke beyond the necessary pass the salt, the fence, and the north pasture needs mending. Sam had a nightmare last night. But Clara caught him watching her sometimes. When she was reading to Sam by the fire. When she was hanging laundry in the bitter cold. When she was standing at the window looking out at the endless white prairie. He never said anything, just watched, and then turned away before she could meet his eyes. On the 8th day, the routine shattered. Clara was kneading bread when she heard hoofbeats approaching too fast for a casual visitor. She wiped her hands on her apron and moved to the window. 3 riders were coming up the road. Even from a distance, she recognized the lead figure. Silver watch chain glinting, expensive coat, Aldous Crane. Her stomach dropped. "Sam." She kept her voice calm. "Go upstairs and stay in your room." "Why, who's coming?" "Just do as I say, right now." Something in her tone must have convinced him. He ran for the stairs without another word. Clara stepped onto the porch just as the riders pulled up. Crane looked down at her with an expression of amused contempt. "Well, well, Jacob Brennan's mystery woman." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "The whole town's been talking about you, you know. The mail-order bride who couldn't even land her own husband." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Of course the town was talking. Of course they knew. "Mr. Crane, isn't it?" She kept her voice steady. "If you're looking for Jacob, he's out with the cattle." "I'm not looking for Brennan. I'm looking at his property." Crane dismounted his boots, crunching in the snow. "Seeing what I'll be taking possession of at the end of the month." The debt was paid. Jacob showed me the papers. Papers can be forged, lost, destroyed. Crane stepped closer. "You're new here, Miss Whitmore, so let me explain how things work. I want something, I get it. I wanted this land 3 years ago. I'll have it now." "Over my dead body." The words came out before Clara could stop them. She felt herself flush, but she didn't back down. Crane's eyebrows rose. Bold words from a woman who's got nothing. No family, no money, no husband. He leaned in close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "You're living in another man's house, raising another man's child, pretending to be something you're not. One word from me, and you'll be run out of this territory." "Then say the word." Clara's heart was pounding so hard she could barely think, but she met his eyes and refused to look away. "Interesting." Crane studied her face. "You've got more spine than I expected. Too bad it won't do you any good." He turned and remounted his horse. Tell Brennan I stopped by. Tell him the clock's ticking." They rode away, and Clara stood on the porch until they disappeared over the horizon. Her hands were shaking. Her legs felt like water, but she'd stood her ground. For the first time in her life, she'd stood her ground. "Clara." She turned. Sam was pressed against the window face, pale with fear. "Is the bad man gone?" "He's gone." She forced a smile. "Everything's fine." But it wasn't fine. She knew it wasn't fine. And when Jacob came home that night, she told him everything. He listened without interrupting. His face grew darker with every word. "He came here," Jacob said slowly, "to my home, while I was gone, and threatened you. He wanted me to be afraid. He wanted me to run." "Are you afraid?" Clara thought about the cold in Crane's eyes, the casual cruelty in his voice, the power he held over everyone in this territory. "Yes," she admitted, "but I'm not running." Jacob looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe, or respect. "Mary said almost those exact words once, when Crane tried to buy the land right after we married. She told me she'd rather die than let a man like that win." "She sounds like she was very brave." "She was." Jacob's voice roughened. "She was the bravest person I ever knew. Until now." Before Clara could respond, he turned and walked out to the barn. She watched him go, heart pounding for an entirely different reason. That night, Sam had his first nightmare since Clara arrived. She was pulled from sleep by screaming, raw, terrified screaming that sent her stumbling down the hall before she was fully awake. She burst into Sam's room to find him thrashing in his bed, tangled in blankets, crying out for his mother. "Mama, Mama, don't go, don't leave me." "Sam." Clara sat on the edge of the bed and gathered him into her arms. "Sam, wake up. You're dreaming. You're safe." She was here. He was sobbing now, clutching at Clara's nightgown. "Mama was here, and then she went away, and I couldn't follow her. I tried to follow her, but I couldn't." "Shh. I know, sweetheart." "Why did she have to die? Why couldn't she stay?" "I don't know." Clara's own eyes were burning. "I don't know why people leave us, but I know she loved you. More than anything in the world, she loved you." "How do you know?" "Because I lost my mother too," Clara thought. "Because I know what it looks like when someone loves you completely, and I can see it in every corner of this house. Because I can feel it," she said instead. "Everywhere I look in this house, I can feel how much she loved you." Sam pulled back, looking at her with those storm-gray eyes. "Do you think she can see us from heaven?" "I think so, yes." "Do you think she's happy that you're here?" Clara's throat tightened. "I hope so, Sam. I really hope so." He curled against her, his breathing slowly steadying. "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" "I'll stay." She held him in the darkness, rocking gently, humming the lullabies her own mother had sung so many years ago. And she didn't notice Jacob standing in the doorway watching them, his face wet with tears he'd never let his son see. The next morning, everything changed. Clara was making coffee when Jacob came in from his early chores. Usually he headed straight for the table, ate in silence, and went back out. But today, he stopped in the middle of the kitchen, hat in his hands, looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. "I heard you," he said. "Last night. With Sam." Clara's hand stilled on the coffee pot. "He had a nightmare." "I know. I was coming to check on him, and I heard—" He stopped, worked his jaw. "I heard you tell him about Mary, about feeling her love in this house. I'm sorry if I overstepped. I didn't mean to speak for your wife, I just—" "No." Jacob's voice was rough. "No, you didn't overstep. You said exactly what he needed to hear. What I should have been saying all along." He set his hat on the table and ran both hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration she was coming to recognize. "I've been failing him. I know I have. Since Mary died, I've been so lost in my own grief that I couldn't see his. I thought if I just kept working, kept moving, eventually the pain would stop. But it doesn't stop, does it? No, Clara said softly. It doesn't stop. You just learn to carry it. How do you know that? Because I lost my mother too, when I was 17. She poured coffee into 2 cups, handed him one. Some days I still forget she's gone. I'll see something beautiful and think, I need to tell Mama about this. And then I remember. Jacob wrapped his hands around the cup, but didn't drink. How long ago? 12 years. Does it get easier? Easier isn't the right word. It gets different. The sharp edges wear down. The wound scars over. But it's always there underneath. He nodded slowly, like she'd confirmed something he'd suspected. Mary used to say I felt things too deep. Said I needed to learn to let go sometimes, to stop holding on to everything so tight. His voice cracked. I couldn't let go of her, though. I tried and I couldn't. Why would you want to? Because it hurts. The words came out raw, broken. Every minute of every day it hurts. I wake up reaching for her. I set a place for her at the table before I remember. I hear her voice in every room of this house. And I can't. He stopped, pressing the heel of his hand against his eyes. I can't make it stop. Clara set down her cup and moved toward him, not touching, but close. Close enough that he could feel her presence. Jacob. He looked up, and she saw something in his eyes she recognized. The same desperate loneliness she'd been carrying for 12 years. The same fear of being seen, being known, being abandoned again. You don't have to make it stop, she said quietly. You just have to survive it. One day at a time. 1 hour at a time. And eventually, you'll find you've survived longer than you thought you could. For a long moment they just stood there, 2 damaged people in a kitchen full of ghosts. Then Jacob reached out and took her hand. Thank you, he said hoarsely. For staying. For helping Sam. For... He stopped, shook his head. Just thank you. Clara squeezed his hand once, then let go. I'll make breakfast. Clara. Sit down, Jacob. Her voice was gentle but firm. Let me take care of things for a while. He sat. And for the first time since she'd arrived, he didn't look away when she caught him watching her. 2 days later, Clara went into town for supplies. Jacob hadn't wanted her to go alone, but she'd insisted. She needed to establish herself to show the people of Silver Creek that she wasn't hiding, wasn't ashamed, wasn't the desperate fraud they'd probably decided she was. The ride was cold and long, but she'd borrowed Mary's heavy coat and wrapped herself in blankets. By the time she reached the general store, she could no longer feel her nose. Agnes Crawford looked up when the bell above the door rang. Her eyes narrowed. You're the Brennan woman. I'm Clara Whitmore. I work for Mr. Brennan as his housekeeper. That's not what I hear. Mrs. Crawford's voice was sharp as a blade. I hear you're living in sin with a grieving widower. I hear you showed up to marry one man and climbed into another man's bed instead. Clara felt heat flood her face, but she kept her voice steady. What you hear is gossip. The truth is that I needed employment, and Mr. Brennan needed help. There's nothing improper about our arrangement. So you say. So I say. And so will anyone who bothers to learn the facts instead of inventing scandals. Mrs. Crawford studied her for a long moment. Clara forced herself to meet that sharp gaze without flinching. You've got spine, the older woman said finally. I'll give you that. I've had to develop it. Most women do one way or another. Mrs. Crawford's expression softened slightly. What do you need? Clara handed over her list, and the transaction proceeded in frosty silence. But as Clara was loading the last of the supplies into the wagon, Mrs. Crawford appeared in the doorway. Franklin Weston, she said. That's who you came here to marry, isn't it? Clara froze. Yes. He's done this before. Brought women out here, taken their money, disappeared. I've seen it happen 3 times in the last 4 years. I didn't have any money for him to take. Then you got lucky. Mrs. Crawford's eyes were unreadable. That man's a predator. He picks women who are desperate, who don't have anyone looking out for them. Women who won't be missed. Clara's stomach turned. Women who won't be missed. She'd been one of those women. She was still one of those women. Why are you telling me this? Because I made up my mind about you when you walked in that door and I was wrong. Mrs. Crawford stepped closer, lowering her voice. You're not what people say. I can see it in your eyes. You're scared, and you're alone, and you're trying to survive. I know what that looks like. Then help me. Clara heard the desperation in her own voice and hated it. Help me prove that I'm not what they say. You don't prove anything by asking for help. You prove it by standing tall and refusing to let them break you. Mrs. Crawford paused. And by taking care of that little boy like he was your own. I'm trying. I know. I can see that too. She turned to go back inside, then stopped. Come to church Sunday. Bring the boy. Let people see who you really are. And Jacob. Brennan too, if you can pry him out of that ranch. Man's been hiding from the world since his wife died. Time somebody reminded him he's still alive. Clara drove back to the ranch with her thoughts churning. By the time she pulled up in front of the house, she'd made a decision. Jacob met her at the wagon, reaching up to help her down. How was town? Enlightening. She took his hand, felt the strength in his grip. We're going to church on Sunday. What? You, me, and Sam. We're going to church and we're going to show everyone in Silver Creek that we have nothing to be ashamed of. Jacob's expression darkened. I haven't been to church since Mary's funeral. I know. People stare. They whisper. I know. Clara stepped closer. But hiding here isn't working. Crane thinks you're weak. The town thinks you're broken. And every day you stay away, you prove them right. I am broken. So am I. So is Sam. She took his other hand, holding both of them in hers. But broken things can still stand. Broken things can still fight. And right now we need to fight. Together. Jacob stared down at their joined hands. His jaw worked. Mary would hate what I've become, he said quietly. She was so strong, so full of fire. She would never have let Crane push her around like this. Then honor her. Be the man she believed you could be. A long moment passed. The wind cut across the prairie sharp with the promise of more snow. Then Jacob nodded. Sunday, he said. We'll go to church. And Clara felt something shift between them, something that had been locked tight, finally beginning to open. That night, she dreamed of her mother. They were sitting together in the kitchen of their old apartment in Boston, sunlight streaming through the windows, the smell of bread baking in the oven. Her mother was young again, beautiful, her dark hair unpinned and flowing over her shoulders. You found them, her mother said. Found who? The people you were meant to find. The family you were meant to have. They're not my family. I'm just the housekeeper. Her mother smiled, that knowing smile that used to drive Clara crazy. Is that what you tell yourself? It's the truth. The truth is that you love them. The boy who thinks you're an angel and the man who's starting to hope again. Her mother reached out and touched Clara's face. It's all right to love them, Clara Jane. It's all right to be happy. I'm afraid. Of course you are. Love is terrifying, but it's also the only thing worth living for. Clara woke with tears on her cheeks and her mother's voice still echoing in her ears. She lay in the darkness for a long time, thinking about what the dream meant, thinking about Sam's hand in hers, thinking about the way Jacob looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, thinking about what it would mean to love them, and what it would cost to lose them. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing, and somewhere in the house she heard Sam cry out in his sleep. Clara was out of bed and down the hall before she'd made the conscious decision to move. She slipped into Sam's room and gathered him into her arms, rocking him gently, whispering comfort into his hair. Shh, I'm here, I'm here. Clara. His voice was thick with sleep. It's me. You're safe. I was dreaming about Mama again. She was saying goodbye. Clara's heart clenched. Was it a good goodbye? I think so. She said. Sam paused, yawning. She said she was glad you came. She said you were supposed to be here. Clara's breath caught. She said that, in the dream, she said it was okay that I loved you, that she wanted me to love you. He was already drifting back to sleep, his body going limp against hers. Clara held him, trying to process what he'd said, trying to understand why a child's dream felt more real than anything else in her life. She stayed until his breathing was deep and even. Then she tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and slipped back into the hallway. Jacob was standing there. Their eyes met in the darkness. I heard, he said quietly. It was just a dream. Maybe. He stepped closer. Or maybe it was something else. Jacob. I know what my son sees when he looks at you. I know why he's attached so fast, so completely. Jacob's voice was low and tense. And I know it's not just because you look like Mary. Then why? Because you make us feel alive again. Because when you're here, this house feels like a home instead of a tomb. Because... He stopped, his hands clenching at his sides. Because I'm starting to feel things I thought I'd never feel again. And it terrifies me. Clara's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. It terrifies me too. They stood there close enough to touch, neither of them moving. The wind screamed outside. The house creaked around them. And then Jacob turned and walked away, leaving Clara alone in the darkness with her racing heart and her unanswered questions. Sunday arrived with crystalline cold and blinding white snow. Clara dressed Sam in his best clothes and spent 20 minutes wrestling with his hair. Jacob emerged from his room in a suit she'd never seen, looking uncomfortable and impossibly handsome. You look nice, she said. He tugged at his collar. I look like a man being led to his execution. That too. The ghost of a smile crossed his face. You're funny. I didn't expect you to be funny. I didn't expect a lot of things about this arrangement. Their eyes met and Clara felt her cheeks warm. She looked away quickly, busying herself with Sam's coat. The ride to town was quiet. Sam sat between them, practically vibrating with excitement. He hadn't been to church since his mother's funeral, and the prospect of seeing other children, of being part of something normal, had him chattering nonstop. But as they approached Silver Creek, his chatter died. He pressed closer to Clara, his small hand finding hers. What if the bad man is there? Then we'll ignore him, Clara said firmly. He has no power over us. But he said, I know what he said. He was trying to scare us, and we're not going to let him. The church was a small white building at the end of Main Street, its steeple rising against the gray sky. People were gathering outside, bundled against the cold, their breath making clouds in the frigid air. Every head turned as Jacob's wagon pulled up. Clara felt the weight of those stairs like physical pressure. She heard the whispers start, saw the pointed looks, the raised eyebrows. But she lifted her chin and climbed down from the wagon, reaching up to help Sam. Ready? She murmured to Jacob. No. Good. Neither am I. They walked into church together, and the whispers followed them like shadows. The pews fell silent when they entered. Clara kept her eyes forward, her hand firmly wrapped around Sam's. She could feel Jacob's presence at her back, solid and tense, and she drew strength from it. They found a seat near the middle of the church, not hiding in the back like criminals, not pushing to the front like they had something to prove, just taking their place among the congregation like any other family. Family. The word echoed in Clara's mind, and she pushed it away. Sam squirmed between them, craning his neck to look around. There's Tommy Miller, he whispered loudly. Can I go sit with him? After the service, Clara whispered back. Sit still. Reverend Ashworth took his place at the pulpit. He was younger than Clara expected, perhaps 40, with kind eyes and a gentle voice. His gaze swept across the congregation and paused briefly on their pew. "Today's sermon is about grace," he began. "About the gift of second chances. About how God puts people in our path exactly when we need them most." Clara's throat tightened. She stared straight ahead, refusing to look at Jacob, refusing to acknowledge the way those words seemed aimed directly at her heart. "We are all broken," Reverend Ashworth continued. "Every one of us carries wounds we don't show the world, losses we don't speak of, fears we bury so deep we forget they're there." He paused. "But grace doesn't ask us to be perfect. Grace finds us exactly where we are and loves us anyway." Sam's hand crept into Clara's. She squeezed it gently, not trusting herself to look down at him. "Some of you," the Reverend said quietly, "are sitting in this church today, carrying burdens you think no one understands. Some of you have lost things, people, dreams, hope itself, and you wonder if you'll ever feel whole again." His eyes found Jacob's. "You will. Not because the pain goes away, but because God sends us angels. Sometimes in the form we expect, sometimes in the form of strangers who show up exactly when we need them." Clara felt Jacob stiffen beside her. She risked a glance and saw his jaw clenched, his hands fisted on his knees. The rest of the sermon washed over her in a blur. When it ended and people began to rise, she felt suddenly exhausted, wrung out as if she'd been running for miles. "Mrs. Brennan?" Clara turned. A woman about her age was standing in the aisle, a baby on her hip, and a cautious smile on her face. "I'm not—" Clara started to correct her, then stopped. What was the point? "Yes. I'm Elizabeth Murphy. My husband's the deputy sheriff." She shifted the baby to her other hip. "I just wanted to say, well, I wanted to welcome you. Silver Creek can be a hard place for newcomers, but not everyone here is as unfriendly as they seem." Clara blinked, surprised. "Thank you. That's very kind. I knew Mary. We were friends." Elizabeth's eyes were warm but sad. "She would have liked you. I can tell." Before Clara could respond, Sam tugged at her hand. "Clara, can I go play with Tommy now? Please." "Go ahead. Stay where I can see you." He ran off and Clara turned back to Elizabeth, but another woman had appeared, older, with steel-gray hair and a face like carved granite. "So you're the one everyone's talking about?" Clara straightened. "I suppose I am. Martha Henderson. My husband owns the feed store." The woman's eyes traveled over Clara from head to toe. "You don't look like a harlot." "I'm not." "I didn't say you were. I said you don't look like one." Martha's mouth twitched. Was that almost a smile? "But looks can deceive. What exactly are your intentions toward Jacob Brennan?" "I work for him, that's all." "That's not what Aldous Crane has been saying." Clara felt her temper flare. "Mr. Crane can say whatever he likes. The truth is the truth regardless of his opinion on it." Martha studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Good. You'll need that fire if you're going to survive here." She turned and walked away, leaving Clara standing in stunned silence. Elizabeth laughed softly. "She likes you. Believe it or not, that was Martha being friendly." That was friendly. For Martha, that was practically an embrace. Elizabeth touched Clara's arm. "Give it time. People will come around. They just need to see who you really are." Clara wanted to ask what she meant, but Jacob appeared at her elbow, his face tight. "We need to go." "What's wrong?" "Crane, he's outside, talking to Sheriff Murphy." Jacob's voice was low and urgent. "I don't know what he's saying, but Murphy keeps looking this way." Clara's stomach dropped. "Let me handle this." "Clara, trust me." She walked toward the church doors before he could argue. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her pace steady, her expression calm. She would not be intimidated. She would not run. Aldous Crane stood on the church steps, his silver watch chain glinting in the weak winter sun. Sheriff Murphy was beside him, listening to whatever poison Crane was pouring in his ear. Mr. Crane, Clara said coolly. Sheriff? Both men turned. Crane's smile was oily and false. Miss Whitmore. Or should I say, Mrs. Brennan? The lines do seem to blur where you're concerned. I'm not sure what you mean. I mean that a woman living alone with a man who isn't her husband tends to raise questions, especially a woman with your history. My history. The failed mail order arrangement. The mysterious past in Boston. The way you've inserted yourself into a grieving family's home. Crane stepped closer. Some might call that predatory behavior. Some might call your harassment of a working woman slanderous. Clara held her ground. But I suppose when you own half the town, you can say whatever you like. Crane's eyes narrowed. Careful. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A man who preys on the vulnerable. A man who uses lies and intimidation to take what isn't his. A man who... That's enough. Sheriff Murphy stepped forward, his face uncomfortable. Miss Whitmore, perhaps you should... She should what? Jacob's voice cut in. He was beside her now, solid and furious. Apologize for telling the truth. Bow down to a man who's been trying to steal my land for 3 years. Now, Jacob. Don't you now Jacob me, Bill. You know exactly what Crane's doing. You've known all along. And you've done nothing because he pays your salary. Murphy's face reddened. That's not fair. None of this is fair. But since when has fair mattered in Silver Creek? The church doors opened behind them. People were streaming out, stopping to watch the confrontation. Clara saw Elizabeth Murphy's worried face, Martha Henderson's sharp eyes, a dozen other expressions ranging from curiosity to alarm. And Sam. Sam was standing at the edge of the crowd, his face white with fear. This isn't over, Crane said quietly. You have 1 week, Brennan. 1 week to pay what you owe or vacate that property. I don't owe you anything. The paperwork says otherwise. Crane smiled. And paperwork is all that matters in a court of law. He turned and walked away, his boots crunching in the snow. The crowd parted for him like water around a stone. Clara stood frozen, her mind racing. 1 week. They had 1 week before Crane took everything. Papa? Sam's voice was small, scared. What's happening? Jacob knelt and pulled his son into his arms. Nothing you need to worry about. Come on, let's go home. But Clara saw the desperation in his eyes, the fear he was trying to hide, and she knew that 1 week wasn't nearly enough time. The ride home was silent, except for Sam's occasional sniffles. Clara sat rigid on the wagon seat, her mind churning. There had to be a way out of this. There had to be something they could do. The papers, she said suddenly. The ones proving the loan was paid. Where are they? In my strongbox. Why? Because if Crane is claiming you still owe money, and you have proof you don't, then his paperwork has to be forged. We just need to prove it. Jacob's laugh was bitter. Prove it to who the sheriff works for him. The judge is his cousin. There's not a court in this territory that would rule against Aldous Crane. Then we go over his head, to the territorial governor, to federal authorities, to anyone who isn't in his pocket. Clara, there has to be a way. She turned to face him, fierce and determined. I didn't survive Franklin Weston just to watch another corrupt man destroy good people. I didn't come all this way to give up without a fight. Jacob stared at her. The anger in his eyes slowly shifted to something else, surprise maybe. Or hope. You really mean that? I really mean it. Why, this isn't your fight. You could walk away, find another position, start over somewhere else. Because I love your son, Clara thought. Because I'm starting to love you. Because this place feels more like home than anywhere I've ever been. Because it's the right thing to do, she said instead. And because I don't run from bullies. Not anymore. Something passed between them, a current of understanding, of shared determination. Then Jacob nodded slowly. All right. When we get home, I'll show you the papers, and then we'll figure out what to do next. Sam had fallen asleep between them, exhausted from the emotional morning. Clara looked down at his peaceful face and felt her resolve harden. She would not let Crane win. Whatever it took, she would not let him destroy this family. The papers were exactly where Jacob said they'd be, in a metal strongbox under his bed, along with other important documents. Mary's death certificate, Sam's birth record, the deed to the land. Clara spread everything out on the kitchen table and began to read. Here. She pointed to a line on the loan agreement. It says the full amount was paid in October of 1877. That's over 2 years ago. I know, I paid it myself. Sold off half my cattle to do it. And you got a receipt. Right here. Jacob handed her a creased document. Signed by the bank manager, who happened to die last year, conveniently enough. Clara's blood ran cold. How did he die? Accident. His horse spooked and threw him. At least that's what they said. And who took over his position at the bank? A man named Robert Crane, Aldous's nephew. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture so dark Clara could barely look at it. A man who wanted land. A convenient death. A nephew installed in a position of power. Forged documents claiming debts that didn't exist. This is bigger than we thought, she said slowly. If Crane killed the bank manager, or had him killed, then he's not just a bully. He's a murderer. You can't prove that. Maybe not. But if I can prove the documents are forged, that might be enough to stop him. How? Clara thought furiously. The handwriting. If Crane or his nephew forged new loan papers, the handwriting won't match the original bank manager's. All we need is something else he signed something from before he died to compare them. Jacob was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into the strongbox and pulled out another document. Mary's parents sent money when Sam was born, a gift. The bank manager handled the transfer personally. He handed Clara the paper. This has his signature on it. Clara looked at the two documents side by side. The signatures were close. Clearly, someone had tried to copy the original, but they weren't identical. The slant was slightly different. The pressure on certain letters wasn't quite right. This is it, she breathed. This is proof. Proof that someone forged documents, not proof that Crane was behind it. It's a start. Clara's mind was racing. We need to get this to someone outside Crane's influence. The territorial capital, a federal marshal, someone who can investigate properly. That's a 3-day ride in good weather. In winter with the passes snowed in? Jacob shook his head. It's impossible. Then we send a telegram from a town where Crane doesn't control the wires. The nearest one is Pine Ridge, 50 miles east. Then we go to Pine Ridge. Jacob stared at her. You're serious? I'm completely serious. We have 6 days before Crane's deadline. That's enough time to ride to Pine Ridge, send the telegram, and get back. If we leave at first light... Jacob interrupted. You're not going. It's too dangerous. I'm the one who figured this out. I should be the one to... No. His voice was hard, final. I won't risk you. Sam needs you here. I'll go alone. And if something happens to you on the road, if Crane finds out what you're doing and sends men after you... Clara stepped closer, her heart pounding. We're stronger together. We go together or not at all. Clara. I mean it, Jacob. I'm not sitting here waiting to find out if you're alive or dead. If you're going, I'm going. They glared at each other across the table. The air crackled with tension. You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met, Jacob said finally. Is that a yes? That's a God help me, I can't talk you out of anything. He ran a hand through his hair. What about Sam? Elizabeth Murphy. She offered to help if we needed anything. I'll ask her to watch him while we're gone. And if she says no, she won't. Jacob shook his head slowly, but Clara saw the corner of his mouth twitch. How do you know? Because she's a good person, and good people help each other. Clara gathered the documents carefully. We leave at dawn. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in the darkness, listening to the wind howl outside, thinking about everything that could go wrong. The weather could turn deadly. Crane could discover their plan. They could get lost, get hurt, get killed. And Sam. What would happen to Sam if neither of them came back? A soft knock at her door made her sit up. Clara? Jacob's voice low and uncertain. You awake? She wrapped herself in a shawl and opened the door. He stood in the hallway, fully dressed, his face drawn with worry. I can't sleep either, he said. Come in. He hesitated, then stepped inside. They stood awkwardly in the small room, the lamplight casting long shadows. I've been thinking, Jacob said slowly. About tomorrow. About what could happen. Me too. If something goes wrong, if I don't make it back, I need you to promise me something. Clara's heart clenched. Don't talk like that. I have to. Sam's all I have left. If I die, he'll have no one. Unless... He stopped, worked his jaw. Unless you stay. Jacob. I know it's a lot to ask. I know we barely know each other. But the way Sam looks at you, the way you take care of him... His voice broke. You're more of a mother to him than anyone else could be. Even if you're not. Even if we're not... He couldn't finish. Clara reached out and took his hand. I'm not going anywhere, she said quietly. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'll take care of Sam. I promise. Jacob's eyes glistened in the lamplight. Thank you. You don't have to thank me. He's... She paused, her own voice threatening to crack. He's mine now. In every way that matters, he's mine. Jacob stared at her. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, then wonder, then something deeper and more dangerous. Clara, he whispered. Don't. She squeezed his hand. Don't say anything we might regret. Not tonight. Not with everything that's about to happen. But I need you to know. I know. She cut him off gently. I know. They stood there in the darkness, holding hands, not speaking. The wind screamed outside. The house creaked around them. Then Jacob leaned in and pressed his forehead to hers. When this is over, he said hoarsely. When Crane is finished and we're safe, I want to tell you everything. Everything I'm feeling. Everything I've been afraid to say. Clara's heart was racing. When this is over. He pulled back slowly, reluctantly. Their eyes met. Dawn, he said. Be ready. I will. He left and Clara stood alone in the empty room, her hand still warm where his had held it. Whatever happened tomorrow, everything had changed. The morning came too fast. Clara dressed in her warmest clothes, Mary's heavy coat, thick gloves, a scarf wrapped around her face. She packed food for the journey, water, the documents carefully wrapped in oilcloth. Sam was still asleep when she crept into his room to say goodbye. She stood over his bed, watching him breathe, memorizing the shape of his face. I'll be back, she whispered. I promise. He stirred, but didn't wake. She kissed his forehead and slipped out. Jacob was waiting by the horses. He'd saddled 2 breath, steaming in the frigid air. Elizabeth Murphy will be here within the hour. I left a note in case Sam wakes up before she arrives. Clara nodded. Her throat was too tight to speak. They mounted and rode out as the sun began to rise, painting the snow pink and gold. Neither of them looked back. The first day passed in a blur of cold and exhaustion. They pushed the horses as hard as they dared, stopping only to rest the animals and eat a few bites of dried beef. The landscape was brutal, endless white, broken only by dark stands of trees and the occasional frozen creek. By nightfall, They'd covered nearly 20 miles. They made camp in a shallow cave, building a small fire for warmth. "You should sleep," Jacob said. "I'll keep watch." "We should take turns. You need rest too." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're exhausted." Clara pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. 2 hours each. I'll wake you when it's your turn." He looked like he wanted to argue, but fatigue won out. He lay down near the fire, his rifle across his chest, and within minutes his breathing deepened. Clara sat in the darkness watching the flames, listening to the sounds of the night. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. She thought about Sam safe in Elizabeth's care. She thought about Crane and his threats. She thought about what it would mean if they succeeded and what it would mean if they failed. And she thought about Jacob, about the way he'd looked at her in the lamplight, about the words he'd almost said. When this is over, he'd promised. When this is over. She prayed they'd both live long enough to see that moment. The second day brought trouble. They were following a narrow trail through the mountains when Clara's horse stumbled, throwing her hard against the rocks. Pain exploded through her shoulder, and she cried out, "Clara!" Jacob was off his horse in an instant, kneeling beside her. "Where does it hurt?" "My shoulder. I think it's just bruised." But when she tried to move her arm, the pain was so intense she nearly blacked out. "It might be dislocated." Jacob's face was grim. "I've seen this before. I can fix it, but—" "Do it. It's going to hurt." "I know. Do it anyway." He positioned himself behind her, his hands gentle but firm on her arm. "On 3. 1, 2. He yanked before he said 3. Clara heard a popping sound, felt a flash of agony so intense the world went white. When she could see again, the pain had dulled to a fierce ache. She could move her arm again. "Thank you," she gasped. "Can you ride?" "I don't have a choice." They mounted up and continued on. Every step of the horse sent pain shooting through Clara's shoulder, but she gritted her teeth and endured. They were too close to stop now. By nightfall, the lights of Pine Ridge appeared on the horizon. "Thank God," Clara breathed. They rode into town as the last daylight faded. It was larger than Silver Creek, more buildings, more people, more life. A proper town with a telegraph office and a sheriff's station and all the things they needed. "We find a room," Jacob said. "Send the telegram first thing in the morning." "No," Clara shook her head. "We send it tonight. We can't waste a single hour. The office will be closed. Then we find whoever runs it and convince them to open it." Jacob stared at her. "Has anyone ever told you you're terrifying when you're determined? Consider yourself warned." They found the telegraph office dark and locked. But there was a light burning in the apartment above it. Clara pounded on the door until a man in his nightshirt appeared, looking furious. "What in the name of—" "I need to send a telegram. Tonight. It's life or death." "Lady, it's nearly midnight. Come back in the morning." "I can't wait until morning. A corrupt man is trying to steal my—" She caught herself. "My family's land. I have proof of his crimes, and I need to contact the territorial governor before it's too late." The man's expression shifted. He looked at Clara, at Jacob, at their exhausted horses steaming in the cold. "Aldous Crane." Clara's heart stopped. "You know him?" "I know of him. His reach extends further than Silver Creek." The man's jaw tightened. "Come inside. I'll send your telegram." An hour later, it was done. The message had been sent to the territorial governor's office outlining Crane's crimes and requesting an immediate investigation. Clara had included every detail: the forged documents, the suspicious death of the bank manager, the threats and intimidation. "No guarantee they'll respond," the telegraph operator warned. "These things can take weeks to investigate." "We don't have weeks. We have 4 days." "Then pray for a miracle." They found a room at the local boarding house and collapsed into sleep. Clara's shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat, but exhaustion was stronger than pain. She dreamed of Sam crying for her, of Crane's men setting fire to the ranch, of Jacob lying still and cold in the snow. She woke before dawn, heart pounding, covered in sweat. Jacob was already awake, sitting by the window watching the sunrise. "Any response?" Clara asked. "Not yet." They waited. An hour passed. 2. Clara paced the small room, unable to sit still, every nerve screaming with impatience. Then there was a knock at the door. Jacob opened it to find the telegraph operator, a piece of paper in his hand. "Message for you. Just came through." Clara snatched it from his hand and read it aloud. "Evidence received. Federal Marshal dispatched to Silver Creek. Arrival within 5 days. Do not confront suspect until Marshal arrives. Territorial Governor's Office." 5 days. The Marshal would arrive 1 day after Crane's deadline. "It's not enough," Clara whispered. "We need to stall him." "How? I don't know, but we have to try." They rode out of Pine Ridge, within the hour, pushing their horses as hard as they dared. Clara's shoulder screamed with every stride, but she didn't slow down. Couldn't slow down. Sam was waiting. Their home was waiting, and Aldous Crane was counting down the days until he could take everything they had. They rode through the night, stopping only when the horses threatened to collapse, and somewhere behind them the clock kept ticking. They made it back to Silver Creek on the 4th day, exhausted and half frozen, but alive. Elizabeth Murphy met them at the ranch, Sam in her arms. The boy let out a cry when he saw them and launched himself at Clara so hard he nearly knocked her off her horse. "You came back! You came back!" "I promised I would." Clara held him tight, breathing in the smell of his hair. "I always keep my promises." "The boy's been asking for you every hour," Elizabeth said quietly to Jacob. "Barely ate, barely slept. He was convinced you weren't coming back." Jacob's face was haggard with guilt. "Thank you for watching him." "Of course. What happened in Pine Ridge? Were you able to—" "A federal marshal is coming. He'll be here in 5 days." Elizabeth's expression fell. "But Crane's deadline is tomorrow." "I know. Jacob, he's got men, armed men. If he comes here with force, then we'll meet him with force." Clara looked up sharply. "Jacob, no, we can't. I'm not letting him take my home. Not after everything we've done to save it." Jacob's voice was hard as iron. "If the marshal arrives too late, so be it. I'll fight Crane myself. And die leaves Sam without a father. Better to die fighting than live as a coward." "That's not brave. That's foolish." Clara handed Sam to Elizabeth and stepped toward Jacob. "Listen to me. Crane wants you to fight. He wants you to give him an excuse to kill you legally. If you attack him, you play right into his hands." "Then what do you suggest?" "We stall. We delay. We find a way to keep him talking until the marshal arrives." "How?" Clara's mind raced. There had to be something. Some way to buy them time. "The church," she said suddenly. "Reverend Ashworth. If we can convince him to support us publicly, Crane might hesitate. He cares about appearances. He won't want witnesses to whatever he's planning." "You think a preacher can stop a man like Crane?" "I think God works in mysterious ways." Clara grabbed Jacob's hand. "Please, trust me. Let me try this before you do anything that can't be undone." Jacob stared at her. His jaw worked. "1 day," he said finally. "If it doesn't work by tomorrow night, I'm handling this my way. That's all I'm asking." She squeezed his hand once, then turned and ran for her horse. She had less than 24 hours to save everything she'd come to love, and she had no idea if it would be enough. Clara rode into Silver Creek like a woman possessed. Her shoulders screamed with every stride. Her muscles burned from days of hard travel, but she didn't slow down. She couldn't. Every minute that passed brought them closer to Crane's deadline. Reverend Ashworth was in the church when she burst through the doors, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Miss Whitmore!" He rose from the front pew, alarmed. "What's wrong?" "I need your help." Clara fought to steady her voice. "Aldous Crane is going to take Jacob Brennan's land tomorrow. He's forged documents, possibly murdered the old bank manager, and he'll destroy a good family if someone doesn't stop him." The Reverend's face went pale. "Those are serious accusations." "I have proof. A federal marshal is on his way, but he won't arrive in time. We need to stall Crane. We need witnesses. We need people who are willing to stand up and say this isn't right." "Clara, I know what I'm asking. I know Crane has power in this town. But you preached about grace last Sunday, about how God puts people in our path when we need them." Her voice cracked. "I need you now, Reverend. Jacob and Sam need you. Please." Reverend Ashworth was silent for a long moment. Clara could see the war playing out on his face: duty against self-preservation, faith against fear. "Crane has threatened me before," he said quietly. "When I spoke out against his business practices 2 years ago, he made it very clear what would happen if I crossed him again." "What did he threaten?" "To burn this church to the ground, with me inside it." Clara's blood ran cold. "And you stayed? This is my calling. These are my people." The Reverend's jaw tightened. "But I'm not a brave man, Clara. I've kept my head down. I've looked the other way when I should have spoken up. I've let fear dictate my choices." "Then let faith dictate them now." He looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his eyes. "Mary Brennan was one of the finest people I ever knew," he said slowly. "She sat in this church every Sunday with her husband and son. She helped the poor. She visited the sick. She loved her family with everything she had." His voice roughened. "When she died, I promised myself I would watch over them, and I've failed, every day since I've failed. You can stop failing right now." The Reverend took a deep breath. "What exactly do you need me to do?" "Call a town meeting, tonight. Bring everyone you can, every person who's ever been afraid of Crane, every person who's looked the other way, every person who still believes in doing what's right." Clara stepped closer. "Make them see that they're not alone, that if they stand together, Crane can't break them. And if they won't stand, if they're too afraid, then at least we'll know we tried. At least we'll go down fighting instead of hiding." Reverend Ashworth studied her face for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Ring the bell," he said. "I'll start spreading the word." The church bell began to toll at sunset. Clara stood on the steps watching people emerge from their homes, their faces confused and wary. A summons at this hour meant trouble. Everyone knew it. Elizabeth Murphy came first, her husband Bill, the deputy sheriff, at her side. His face was troubled. Clara knew he was caught between his conscience and his job, but he'd come. That was something. Martha Henderson arrived next, her husband trailing behind her. She met Clara's eyes and gave a curt nod. Agnes Crawford from the general store, Thomas Miller, the blacksmith, the widow Patterson from the train station. One by one, the people of Silver Creek filed into the church, drawn by the bell's urgent summons. And in the back of the crowd, Clara saw Jacob. He'd brought Sam. The boy was holding his father's hand, his gray-blue eyes wide and frightened. When he spotted Clara, his face lit up. "Clara." He broke free and ran to her, throwing his arms around her waist. She hugged him back, her heart swelling. "What's happening?" Sam whispered. "Why is everyone here?" "We're going to fight the bad man. Together." "Is it going to work?" "I don't know." Clara knelt down to look him in the eye. "But we have to try. Even when we're scared. Even when we don't know if we'll win. We have to try." Sam nodded solemnly. "Mama used to say that. She said brave wasn't about not being scared. It was about doing the right thing even when you were." Clara's throat tightened. "Your mama was very wise." "I know." Sam squeezed her hand. "She would have liked you." Before Clara could respond, Reverend Ashworth stepped to the front of the church and raised his hands for silence. "Friends," he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the packed room. "I've called you here tonight because something terrible is about to happen. And I truly believe, that we are the only ones who can stop it. He told them everything. About Crane's false claims against Jacob Brennan, about the forged documents, about the suspicious death of the old bank manager, about the federal marshal who was coming but wouldn't arrive in time. The crowd listened in stunned silence. Clara watched their faces, trying to gauge their reactions. Some looked angry. Some looked frightened. Some looked like they wanted to run out the door and pretend they'd never heard any of this. "I know what you're thinking," Reverend Ashworth continued. "You're thinking that Crane is too powerful, that standing against him is suicide, that it's better to keep your heads down and hope he doesn't come for you next." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. "But I have to ask you, where does it end? Today, it's Jacob Brennan. Tomorrow, it could be any one of you. Crane has been slowly strangling this town for years, and we've let him do it because we were afraid, because we thought we were alone." His voice rose. "But we're not alone. Look around you. Every person in this room has been affected by Aldous Crane. Every person in this room knows someone who's been hurt by his greed. And every person in this room has a choice to make tonight." He stepped forward, his eyes blazing with conviction. "We can cower in our homes and watch another good family be destroyed, or we can stand together and say enough. Not here, not to our neighbors, not anymore." Silence fell. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone. Then Martha Henderson stood up. "I'm in," she said flatly. "Crane cheated my husband out of a fair price for our grain 3 years running. It's time someone held him accountable." Thomas Miller rose next. "He put my brother out of business, threatened to burn his shop if he didn't sell at a loss. I'm in." One by one, people began to stand. The widow Patterson, Agnes Crawford, Elizabeth Murphy with her husband looking increasingly uncomfortable beside her. "Bill." Elizabeth's voice was quiet but firm. "You know what's right." The deputy sheriff looked at his wife, looked at the crowd of people on their feet, looked at Jacob Brennan standing in the back with his son. Then he stood. "I've been looking the other way too long," he said heavily. "It ends tonight." Clara felt tears burning in her eyes. She looked at Jacob and saw the same emotion on his face: disbelief, gratitude, hope. They weren't alone anymore. "What do we do?" someone called out. "Crane's got men, guns. We can't just—" "We don't need guns," Clara interrupted. She moved to the front of the church, her voice strong and clear. "What we need is witnesses. When Crane comes tomorrow, we meet him together, every single one of us. We stand on Brennan land and we make it clear that whatever he does, the whole town is watching. He'll kill us all. He might try, but can he kill an entire town? Can he silence everyone here?" Clara's eyes swept the room. "Crane's power comes from our fear, from our silence, from the belief that he can do whatever he wants without consequence. We take that away, and he's just one man. One man with a lot of money and a lot of hired guns. Me. And we're dozens of people who are done being afraid." The murmuring grew louder. Clara could feel the tide shifting, fear giving way to anger, helplessness giving way to determination. "There's something else," Reverend Ashworth said. He pulled a paper from his coat. "This is a telegram that arrived an hour ago, from the territorial governor's office." The room went silent. "Federal Marshal James Thornton departed Helena yesterday morning. Expected arrival in Silver Creek tomorrow evening." Clara's heart leaped. "Tomorrow evening, that's—" "1 day earlier than expected." The Reverend smiled grimly. "Apparently the governor takes accusations of murder very seriously. But Crane's deadline is noon tomorrow." Jacob's voice cut through the murmur. "The marshal won't arrive until evening. We still have to survive the morning." "Then we survive the morning." Clara turned to face the crowd. "We hold Crane off for as long as it takes. We stall. We delay. We do whatever we have to do to keep him from taking that land until the marshal arrives. And if we can't, then at least we'll have tried. At least we'll have stood for something. Clara's voice dropped raw with emotion. I came to this town with nothing. No family, no money, no hope. Jacob Brennan and his son gave me a home when I had nowhere else to go. They gave me a family when I thought I'd never have one again. I will not stand by and watch them destroyed, not without a fight. The silence that followed was electric. Then Sam's voice, small but clear, cut through it. Clara's my mama now. Every eye in the room turned to the boy standing beside his father. I know she's not my real mama. My real mama's in heaven. Sam's chin trembled, but he didn't look away. But Clara loves me like a real mama. She takes care of me and holds me when I have nightmares, and she keeps her promises. Always. He looked up at Clara, his storm-gray eyes swimming with tears. If the bad man takes our home, she won't have anywhere to go. And I can't lose another mama. I can't. Clara's heart shattered and rebuilt itself in the space of a single breath. She crossed to Sam and knelt in front of him, taking his face in her hands. You won't lose me, she whispered. No matter what happens tomorrow, no matter where we end up, I will always, always be your mama. Do you understand? Sam nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks. I love you, he said. I love you so much. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know. She pulled him into her arms and held him while he cried, and around them the people of Silver Creek wiped their own tears and made their choice. We'll be there. Martha Henderson's voice was rough with emotion. All of us, tomorrow at dawn. The crowd murmured agreement. One by one they filed out of the church, their faces set with determination. The battle lines had been drawn. Clara stayed at the church until the last person left. Jacob found her sitting in the front pew, Sam asleep against her shoulder. He sat down beside her close enough that their arms touched. That was something, he said quietly. What you did tonight. I didn't do anything. They made their own choice. You gave them the courage to make it. There's a difference. Clara looked down at Sam's peaceful face. He called me Mama, in front of everyone. I know. Are you all right with that? Jacob was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Mary would have loved you. I know that as surely as I know my own name. She would have seen what I see, a woman with more courage and heart than anyone I've ever known. A woman who walked into our lives when we were drowning and taught us how to swim again. He turned to face her, his dark eyes intense. Sam was right. You're his mama now, in every way that matters. He paused, his jaw working, and I was praying, that you might want to make it official. Clara's breath caught. Jacob, I know the timing is terrible. I know we might not survive tomorrow, but if there's any chance we do, I need you to know how I feel. He took her hand, his calloused fingers trembling slightly. I love you, Clara. I didn't think I could ever love anyone again after Mary, but you proved me wrong. You crashed into my life like a storm, and you made everything better. Tears were streaming down Clara's face. She didn't try to stop them. I love you too, she whispered. I've loved you for weeks. I was just too afraid to say it. Then marry me. Not because it's practical. Not because it protects your reputation. Marry me because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Yes. The word came out before she could think, before she could doubt, before fear could stop her. Yes, I'll marry you. Jacob's face transformed. Joy, relief, disbelief, all of it flooding his features at once. He leaned in and kissed her, gentle and fierce and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, Sam was watching them with sleepy eyes. Does this mean Clara's staying forever? Forever, Jacob confirmed. If she'll have us. I'll have you. Clara pulled them both close. Both of you. Forever. They sat together in the empty church, three broken people who had found each other in the darkness. And for one perfect moment, the fear of tomorrow faded away. Dawn broke cold and gray. Clara stood on the porch of the ranch house watching the horizon. Jacob was beside her, rifle in hand, and behind them, streaming up the road from Silver Creek, came the people who had promised to stand with them. Martha Henderson arrived first, her husband at her side. Thomas Miller came next, his massive blacksmith's arms folded across his chest. The widow Patterson, Agnes Crawford, Elizabeth Murphy with her husband Bill, who wore his deputy badge prominently on his coat, and more, so many more. People Clara had never met, people she'd only seen in passing, people who had heard what happened at the church and decided they couldn't stay silent anymore. By the time the sun was fully up, more than 50 people stood on Brennan land. They came. Jacob's voice was thick with emotion. They actually came. They're good people. They just needed someone to remind them. Clara. He turned to her, his eyes haunted. Whatever happens today, I want you to know. Don't. She took his hand. Don't say goodbye. We're not going to need it. The sound of hoofbeats cut through the morning air. Clara's stomach dropped. She saw them coming from the east, Aldous Crane at the head of a column of riders. 6 men. Maybe 8. All of them armed. Crane pulled his horse to a stop at the edge of the crowd. His face was a mask of fury as he surveyed the people blocking his path. What is this? This is your neighbor's Aldous. Reverend Ashworth stepped forward. Your community, the people you've been stepping on for years. I don't know what lies this woman has told you. No lies. Sheriff Murphy's voice was hard. We know about the forged documents, Crane. We know about the bank manager. We know everything. Something flickered in Crane's eyes. Fear, maybe, or calculation. You don't know anything. You have no proof. We have proof. Clara moved to stand beside the sheriff. And a federal marshal is on his way to investigate. He'll be here by evening. Crane's face went white. You're bluffing. Telegram from the territorial governor's office. Want to see it? The silence that followed was absolute. Clara watched Crane's men exchange nervous glances. They were hired guns loyal to money, not to any man, and money couldn't protect them from a federal investigation. This isn't over. Crane's voice was shaking with rage. I'll have my lawyers. Your lawyers can't help you. Clara stepped closer, her voice carrying to every person present. You forged documents. You stole from hard-working families. You threatened and intimidated anyone who stood in your way. And when the bank manager threatened to expose you, you had him killed. That's a lie. Is it? Then you won't mind answering the marshal's questions. You won't mind showing him your records. You won't mind explaining why your nephew took over the bank right after the murder. Crane's mask finally cracked. Clara saw the monster underneath the desperation, the cruelty, the absolute certainty that he was untouchable. You stupid woman, he snarled. You think you've won. You think this changes anything. He reached for his gun. Don't. The voice came from the back of the crowd. Everyone turned. A man sat on horseback at the edge of the gathering. He wore a long coat and a badge that caught the morning light. Federal Marshal James Thornton. He dismounted slowly, deliberately. I took an earlier train. Crane's hand froze on his weapon. Mr. Crane, you're under arrest for fraud, theft, and suspicion of murder. I'd advise you not to make this worse than it already is. You can't do this. Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are. The marshal's voice was cold. And I know what you've done. The governor's office has been receiving complaints about you for years. This was just the final straw. He gestured to 2 men who had ridden in behind him. Take him into custody. And his men too. We'll sort out who was following orders and who knew what they were doing. Clara watched as Crane was dragged from his horse, his hands bound behind his back. He was screaming now. Threats, curses, promises of vengeance, but no one was listening anymore. His power was broken. His reign of terror was over. Clara's legs gave out. Jacob caught her before she hit the ground, his arms strong and steady around her. It's over, he murmured against her hair. It's really over. I can't believe it. She was laughing and crying at the same time. I can't believe we actually won. We won. He pulled back to look at her face. You won. None of this would have happened without you. It was all of us. The whole town. The whole town followed you. Jacob's eyes were shining. You gave them something to believe in. You gave them hope. Clara. Sam came running from the house where Elizabeth had been keeping him safe. He threw himself at her, nearly knocking her over again. Is the bad man gone? Is it over? It's over, sweetheart. She held him tight. The bad man's never going to hurt us again. Promise? I promise. Around them, the people of Silver Creek were celebrating, hugging each other, crying with relief, years of fear melting away in the cold morning air. Martha Henderson appeared at Clara's side. I owe you an apology. For what? For judging you when you arrived, for assuming the worst. The older woman's voice was gruff but sincere. You're not what I thought you were. Neither are you. Clara smiled. I thought you hated me. I thought I did too. Martha's mouth twitched. Turns out I was just jealous. You've got more backbone than anyone I've ever met. I learned from good teachers. Mary would be proud. Martha's voice softened. She really would. Clara looked at Jacob, at Sam, at the community that had risen up to protect them. She thought about the woman she'd been when she'd stepped off that train, desperate, alone, with nothing but a battered suitcase and broken dreams. That woman felt like a stranger now. Clara. Jacob's voice was quiet. There's something I need to do. What? He took her hand and led her to the front of the crowd. Every eye turned to watch them. I know the timing is strange, Jacob said loudly, but life's too short to wait for the perfect moment, and I've already wasted too much time being afraid. He turned to face Clara, taking both her hands in his. Clara Jane Whitmore, you came into my life when I was lost in darkness. You brought light back into my home. You gave my son a mother and gave me something I never thought I'd have again, hope. His voice cracked. I love you. I've loved you almost from the moment you knelt in the snow and promised my son you wouldn't lie to him. And I'm asking you now in front of everyone who matters, will you marry me? Not someday, not when things settle down, today, right now, while the whole town is here to witness. Clara's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. Jacob. I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few weeks, but I've spent enough of my life waiting for the right time. I don't want to wait anymore. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold ring. This was my grandmother's. My mother gave it to me when I married Mary, and now I want you to have it. Clara stared at the ring, tears streaming down her face. Yes, she whispered. What? Yes. She laughed through her tears. Yes, I'll marry you. Today. Right now. In front of everyone. A cheer went up from the crowd. Sam whooped with joy. And Jacob slipped the ring onto Clara's finger with hands that trembled. Reverend Ashworth, someone shouted. Get up here. The Reverend made his way through the crowd, his face split in a grin. I believe I'm being summoned. Will you marry us? Jacob asked. Right here, right now. It would be my honor. The ceremony was brief and imperfect, and absolutely beautiful. Clara stood in her travel-worn dress, with her injured shoulder and her exhausted body, and she pledged her life to the man who had saved her. Jacob stood with tears on his cheeks, and his son pressed against his side, and he promised to love her until his last breath. And when Reverend Ashworth pronounced them husband and wife, the entire town of Silver Creek erupted in applause. You may kiss your bride. Jacob cupped Clara's face in his hands, his eyes searching hers. I love you, Mrs. Brennan. I love you too, Mr. Brennan. He kissed her, and the crowd cheered louder, and Sam jumped up and down shouting, She's really my mama now! She's really my mama! Clara had arrived in Silver Creek as a woman with nothing. No family, no home, no hope. And now standing in the arms of her husband with her son pressed against her side and an entire community celebrating around them, she had everything she'd ever wanted. The mail-order bride nobody met had found exactly where she belonged. The celebration lasted until the stars came out. Clara stood on the porch of her home now truly hers, and watched the last wagons disappear down the road toward Silver Creek. Her body ached with exhaustion. Her shoulder throbbed, but her heart had never felt so full. "Mama." She turned. Sam was standing in the doorway, his eyes heavy with sleep, but fighting to stay open. "What is it, sweetheart?" "Are you really staying forever now?" Clara knelt down and pulled him into her arms. "Forever and ever. You're stuck with me." "Good." He yawned hugely. "I don't want anyone else." "Neither do I." Jacob appeared behind them, his hand warm on Clara's shoulder. "Time for bed, little man. Will you both tuck me in? Together?" "Of course." Clara took one of his hands, Jacob took the other, and they walked him upstairs together. They tucked him into his bed, the same bed where Clara had held him through nightmares, where she'd whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep. But now those promises were real. Now they were forever. "Mama." Sam's voice was already slurring with sleep. "Yes. I had a dream about my other mama last night, the one in heaven." Clara's breath caught. "What did she say?" "She said thank you." His eyes fluttered closed. "She said thank you for taking care of us." Clara couldn't speak. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she bent to kiss his forehead. "Sleep now, sweetheart. I'll be here when you wake up." But he was already gone, breathing deep, and even a small smile on his face. Clara and Jacob stood together in the doorway, watching their son sleep. After a long moment, Jacob took her hand and led her back downstairs. "Clara." His voice was rough. "What Sam said. I know. Mary would have loved you. I believe that with everything I am." "I hope so." Clara wiped her eyes. "I hope I can be half the mother she was." "You already are." Jacob pulled her close. "You already are." They stood together in the quiet house, holding each other, and Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real lasting peace. But peace, she would learn, never lasted forever. 3 days later, the trouble started. Clara was hanging laundry when she saw the rider approaching. Her heart-seized memories of Crane's men were still fresh, but as the figure drew closer, she realized it was a woman. A young woman in traveling clothes, her face pale and drawn. "Can I help you?" Clara called out. The woman pulled her horse to a stop. "I'm looking for Clara Whitmore, the mail-order bride." "I'm Clara Brennan now." "But yes, I was Clara Whitmore." The woman's face crumpled. "Thank God. Thank God I found you." She dismounted clumsily, nearly falling, and Clara rushed forward to steady her. "Who are you? What's wrong?" "My name is Sarah Weston, Franklin Weston's wife." Clara went cold. "His wife?" "He married me 3 years ago. Told me I was the only one. Told me—" Sarah's voice broke. "I only found out last month what he'd been doing. Luring women out west, taking their money, destroying their lives. I came as soon as I could." Why come to me?" "Because you're the only one who got away." Sarah gripped Clara's arms. "The others there were so many others, they all ended up dead or worse. But you survived. You escaped. And I need to know how." Clara's mind was reeling. "Come inside. You need to sit down." She led Sarah into the kitchen and poured her a cup of coffee. The younger woman's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the cup. "Start from the beginning," Clara said. "Tell me everything." Sarah's story came out in broken pieces. She'd married Franklin Weston believing he was a respectable businessman. For 2 years she'd lived in ignorance of his true nature. Then 6 months ago, she'd found his letters. Dozens of them from women all over the country, each one responding to his marriage advertisements. I confronted him. Sarah's voice was hollow. He didn't even try to deny it. He laughed, said I was naive, said this was how the world worked for men like him. What did he do to the women? Different things. Some he just took money from and abandoned. Others? She swallowed hard. Others disappeared. I found records, names, dates, amounts. He's been doing this for almost 10 years. Clara's stomach turned. Why didn't you go to the authorities? I tried. They didn't believe me. Franklin has connections, friends in high places. Everyone I turned to for help either owed him favors or was too afraid to act. So why come to me? Because I heard what you did in Silver Creek, how you stood up to Aldous Crane, how you got a federal marshal involved. Sarah's eyes were desperate. The marshal who investigated Crane, is he still here? He left yesterday, but then I need to find him. I need to show him what I have. The letters, the records, everything. Sarah pulled a thick envelope from her coat. This is proof. Real proof. Enough to put Franklin in prison for the rest of his life. Clara took the envelope with trembling hands. She pulled out the papers inside and began to read. Names, dates, amounts, and at the bottom of each page a notation in Franklin Weston's handwriting. Deceased. Deceased. Relocated. Deceased. My God, Clara breathed. He killed them. Maybe not with his own hands, but he killed them. And he'll keep killing until someone stops him. Does he know you're here? Sarah's face went white. He knows I took the papers. I ran while he was out of town, but he'll figure out where I went. He always figures everything out. Fear crept up Clara's spine. How long until he comes looking? A few days, maybe less. Then we don't have much time. Clara's mind was racing. Franklin Weston had destroyed her plans once. He'd nearly destroyed her life. And now he was coming here to her home, to the family she'd fought so hard to build. Not this time. Never again. Stay here, she told Sarah. I need to talk to my husband. She found Jacob in the barn mending a harness. His face darkened when she told him what Sarah had said. Weston's coming here. He will when he figures out where his wife went. Then we send her away. Pine Ridge, Helena, anywhere but here. We can't. She has evidence that could put him in prison. If she disappears again, that evidence disappears with her. Clara. Jacob gripped her shoulders. We just finished with Crane. We nearly lost everything. I won't risk you and Sam for a stranger's fight. It's not a stranger's fight. It's mine. Clara met his eyes. Franklin Weston is the reason I came to Montana. His lies brought me here. If I'd actually married him, if he'd been at that station when I arrived. She couldn't finish. The implications were too horrifying. I could have been one of those names on his list. Deceased. Just another woman who disappeared. Jacob's face went pale. Clara. I survived because he wasn't there. Because you were. She took his hands. I can't walk away from this. I can't pretend it's not my problem when there are other women out there who might not be as lucky as I was. So what do you want to do? I want to stop him. Once and for all. Jacob was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled her into his arms. All right. What's the plan? They sent word to Marshal Thornton that same day. The response came faster than Clara expected. Thornton had heard of Franklin Weston. There was already an investigation underway, but they'd been unable to gather enough evidence. Your witness changes everything, his telegram read. Arriving in 3 days. Keep her safe until then. 3 days. They had to keep Sarah Weston alive and hidden for 3 days. It wasn't enough time. Franklin Weston arrived on the second day. Clara was in the kitchen when she heard the hoofbeats. She looked out the window and felt her blood turn to ice. He looked exactly like his photograph. Dark hair, strong jaw, pleasant smile. The face of a gentleman. The face of a killer. Clara. Jacob appeared at her side, rifle in hand. Take Sam and Sarah. Go out the back. Head for the Miller's place. I'm not leaving you. This isn't a negotiation. You're right. It's not. Clara grabbed the shotgun from above the door. Sam. Her son appeared at the top of the stairs, his face frightened. Go to Sarah's room. Stay there until I come get you. Don't open the door for anyone except me or your father. Understand? Mama. Understand. Yes, ma'am. He ran. Clara turned back to Jacob. Whatever happens, she said quietly, we face it together. Jacob's jaw tightened. Then he nodded. They walked out onto the porch together. Franklin Weston sat on his horse, looking around the property with an expression of amused contempt. He wasn't alone. 2 men flanked him, both armed. Mrs. Brennan. His voice was smooth as silk. Or should I say, Miss Whitmore, I confess I was disappointed when you didn't show up for our wedding. I found better prospects. So I see. His eyes traveled over Jacob dismissively. I'm looking for my wife. I believe she may have visited you recently. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play games with me. The pleasantness dropped from his voice like a mask. Sarah took something that belongs to me. I want it back. Your wife isn't property to be collected. The documents she stole are, and I will have them one way or another. Jacob stepped forward, rifle raised. Get off my land. Or what? You'll shoot me. Franklin smiled. Go ahead. My men have instructions. If anything happens to me, they burn this place to the ground, with everyone inside. Clara's heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. You're bluffing. Am I? Franklin dismounted slowly, deliberately. I've done this before, Mrs. Brennan. Many times. I know exactly how it ends. The heroic husband makes his stand. The brave wife refuses to back down. And then everyone dies, and I walk away with what I came for. He stepped closer. But it doesn't have to be that way. Give me the papers and my wife and I'll leave. No one has to get hurt. And what happens to Sarah? That's between her and me. You'll kill her, like you killed the others. Something flickered in Franklin's eyes. You've been reading her fantasies. Sarah has a vivid imagination. I've seen the records, names, dates, amounts. Your handwriting. Clara's voice hardened. Deceased. Over and over. Deceased. Lies. Fabrications. The ravings of a jealous wife. Then you won't mind explaining them to the federal marshal who's arriving tomorrow. Franklin went very still. What marshal? James Thornton. He investigated Aldous Crane. Now he's coming to investigate you. Clara allowed herself a small smile. Funny how these things work out. Franklin's face twisted. The pleasant mask was completely gone now, replaced by something cold and vicious. You're lying. Telegram came yesterday. He's already on his way. Then I suppose I'll have to work faster than I planned. He drew his gun. Everything happened at once. Jacob fired, hitting one of Franklin's men in the shoulder. The man screamed and fell from his horse. Franklin dove for cover, returning fire. A bullet splintered the porch railing inches from Clara's head. The second hired gun charged toward the house. Clara raised the shotgun and fired. The recoil nearly knocked her off her feet, but the man went down. Inside! Jacob shouted. Now! They scrambled through the door as bullets tore into the wood around them. Clara's ears were ringing. Her hands were shaking, but she forced herself to reload. How many left? Franklin and the one I wounded. Maybe one more we didn't see. Where's Sarah? Upstairs, with Sam. Clara's blood ran cold. The back door. If someone comes in through the back... She didn't finish. She was already running. The stairs seemed endless. She took them 2 at a time, her lungs burning her shoulders, screaming. Sam, Sarah! She reached the guest room door just as it crashed open from the inside. Franklin Weston stood in the doorway. Sarah's arm twisted behind her back, a gun pressed to her temple. "Drop the shotgun!" Clara didn't move. "Drop it or I kill her right now." Sarah's face was white with terror. "Clara, don't—" "Shut up!" Franklin twisted her arm harder and she cried out. "The shotgun! On the floor! Now!" Clara's mind raced. She couldn't give up the weapon, but she couldn't let Sarah die either. "Where's my son? The boy hiding under the bed last I saw, crying for his mama." Franklin's smile was cruel. Such a sweet child. It would be a shame if something happened to him. Rage exploded through Clara, a fury so intense it burned away the fear. "If you touch him, you'll what, kill me?" Franklin laughed. "You're not a killer, Mrs. Brennan. I can see it in your eyes. You're soft, weak, just like all the others." "Mama!" Sam's voice small and scared from somewhere behind Franklin. "Stay hidden, baby." Clara's voice was steady, even as her heart was breaking. "Close your eyes." Touching. Franklin's grip on Sarah tightened. "Now, the shotgun. I won't ask again." Clara looked at Sarah, at the terror in her eyes, at the silent plea. Then she looked past her to where Sam's small face was visible in the gap under the bed, and she made her choice. She dropped the shotgun. "Good." Franklin released Sarah, shoving her toward Clara. "Now the papers. They're in the kitchen. In the—" A gunshot exploded from downstairs. Franklin spun toward the sound. Clara moved. She grabbed Sarah and shoved her toward Sam's hiding spot, then dove for the shotgun. Franklin turned back, raising his weapon. Too late. Clara fired from the floor, the blast catching Franklin in the chest. He stumbled backward, shock on his face, and crashed through the window behind him. Glass shattered, wood splintered, and then there was silence. Clara scrambled to her feet and looked down. Franklin Weston lay in the snow 2 stories below, blood spreading around him, his eyes open and staring at nothing. "Clara," Jacob's voice from somewhere below. "Clara, are you?" "I'm okay." Her voice didn't sound like her own. "I'm okay. We're all okay." She turned to find Sam crawling out from under the bed. He ran to her, throwing his arms around her waist. "Mama, Mama, I was so scared." "I know, sweetheart, I know." She held him tight. "But it's over now. It's really over." Sarah was crying, collapsed against the wall. Clara reached out and pulled her close, too. "You're safe," she whispered. "He can't hurt you anymore. He can't hurt anyone anymore." They clung to each other as Jacob's footsteps thundered up the stairs. He burst into the room wild-eyed and saw them huddled together. Thank God. He crossed to them in 3 strides and wrapped his arms around all of them. Thank God. They stayed like that for a long time, 4 people holding each other in a room full of broken glass and gunsmoke alive against all odds. Marshal Thornton arrived the next morning. He found the bodies of Franklin Weston and his men, took statements from everyone involved, and collected Sarah's evidence. By the time he left, he had enough to close investigations into more than a dozen suspicious deaths across 3 territories. "You did a brave thing," he told Clara before he rode out. "A lot of women are alive today because of what you did." "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice." His eyes were kind but knowing. "You chose to fight. Not everyone does." Sarah stayed with them for a week, recovering from her ordeal. On the day she left, she hugged Clara tight. "I don't know how to thank you." "Stay alive. Build a good life. That's thanks enough." "I will." Sarah pulled back, her eyes wet. "You saved me, Clara, in more ways than you know." Clara watched her ride away and felt something loosen in her chest. A burden she'd been carrying since the day she'd stepped off that train finally released. It was over. All of it. The fear, the danger, the running. She was finally free. Spring came early that year. Clara stood on the porch watching Sam chase Pepper through the melting snow. The air was warmer now, carrying the promise of new growth and new beginnings. Jacob came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything." She leaned back against him. "The train, the station, the day I arrived, the day Sam called you Mama, the day everything changed." She turned in his arms to face him. "I came here with nothing, Jacob. No hope, no future, no reason to believe things would ever get better. And now I have everything." She touched his face. "A husband I love, a son who calls me Mama, a home that's really mine. It's not just yours, it's ours." "Ours," she smiled. "I like that word." "Mama, Papa." Sam came running up, his face flushed with excitement. "Come quick, Daisy's having her calf." They followed him to the barn, where the mare was indeed in labor. Clara held Sam back while Jacob helped guide the new life into the world. When it was over, a wobbly-legged calf stood blinking in the straw, its mother nuzzling it gently. "It's a girl," Jacob said. "What should we call her?" Sam considered seriously. "Hope." Clara's throat tightened. "Why Hope?" "Because that's what Mama always said. My other Mama, I mean." He looked up at Clara. "She said hope was the most important thing. Even when everything was bad, if you still had hope, you could make it through." She was right. Clara knelt down and pulled him close. She was absolutely right. They walked back to the house together, the three of them, as the sun set over the mountains and painted the sky in shades of gold and rose. That night, after Sam was in bed, Clara and Jacob sat together on the porch. "I've been thinking," Jacob said slowly, "about what Sam said, about hope. What about it? When Mary died, I lost mine. I stopped believing things could get better. I stopped believing I could be happy again." He took her hand. "And then you showed up. This stranger on a train platform with nothing but a battered suitcase and a look in your eyes like you'd lost everything. I had lost everything. So had I." He squeezed her hand. "But somehow we found each other. Two broken people who had every reason to give up. And we didn't. We didn't. That's what hope is, isn't it?" His voice was rough with emotion. "Not believing everything will be perfect. Just believing it's worth trying, worth fighting for." Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. "I never thought I'd have this. Any of this. A husband who loves me. A child who calls me Mama. A place where I belong." "You belong here. You always will." "I know." She smiled. "I finally know." The night was quiet around them. Stars scattered across the sky like scattered diamonds. And somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled its ancient song. Clara thought about the woman she'd been when she'd first boarded that train in Boston. Desperate, alone, convinced that her life was over before it had really begun. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the lies and the heartbreak, the fear and the fighting, the moments when she'd wanted to give up and the moments when she'd found the strength to keep going. She thought about Mary, the woman she'd never met, but felt she knew. The woman who had loved Jacob and Sam with everything she had. The woman who had left behind a legacy of hope that had somehow found its way to Clara. And she thought about Sam asleep upstairs dreaming his dreams. Her son now in every way that mattered. "Jacob. I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Jacob went still. "What?" "I'm pregnant." Clara laughed at the shock on his face. "I saw the doctor in town last week. I wanted to be sure before I told you." We're going to have a baby. Sometime in the fall, he thinks." Jacob's face transformed. Joy broke through like sunrise after a long night. "A baby." He pulled her into his arms. "Clara, my Clara. Are you happy?" Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He kissed her long and deep, I love you. I love you so much. I love you too. They held each other on the porch of their home under the vast Montana sky, and Clara felt the future stretching out before them, bright and beautiful and full of possibility. She had come to Silver Creek as a mail-order bride nobody wanted. She had found a family in the most unexpected way, a grieving man, a broken boy, a ghost she resembled but could never replace. She had fought for them, nearly died for them. And in the end, she had earned something she'd never dared to hope for. A place to belong, a family to love, a future worth fighting for. The mail-order bride nobody met had become the heart of a family who would die to protect her. And as Clara sat in her husband's arms, feeling new life grow inside her, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was exactly where she was meant to be. She was home.